Gimel, Mishnah Yud. We've just finished off in the previous Mishnah. We were told about Ben Gamlo, who made the lots for the So'er and the Azazel, the So'er Azazel and the So'er Hashem, out of gold. He upgraded them from this boxwood that they used to golden tablets. And they were mazkirin Oisei L'Shvach, they used to praise him for his generosity. And agav that, by way of mentioning that, this Mishnah now goes on to tell various other donations to the Beis HaMikdash, where the philanthropists, the donors, were also mentioned l'shvach. So says the Mishnah, Ben Kotin also Shneim also Dad Lakir. Ben Kotin, he was a Kohen Gadol, and he would make 12 taps, 12 spouts to the kiyar. Shelo hoyu lo yeh l'shnaim, because previously there were only 2 spouts. Now, the kiyar is the item in the Beis HaMikdash where the Kohanim would wash Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. And initially it only had 2 spouts, so a maximum of 2 Kohanim could do Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim at one time. He decided to make 12 spouts on the kiyar to enable 12 Kohanim to do Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. Why 12? So this is a reference to the Mishnah, previously Perek Beis Mishnah Gimel, where the second lottery determined which Kohanim would be involved in the Korban Tomid. And we said there that 13 Kohanim would be involved. And therefore he made 12 spouts. Why 12? Because the 13th Kohen didn't actually need to do Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. Because one of those jobs was Shchita, to shech the Korban Tomid. And Shchita is kosher bizarre. A non-Kohen is allowed to do the Shchita. He doesn't need to do Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. But the other 12 did. So therefore, Ben Kotin would made the kiyar have 12 spouts to facilitate this. And Va'afhu, continues the Mishnah, and even he also muchni lakiyar, he made a special pulley system for the kiyar, shelo yihu meimov nifsalin belino, because the water shouldn't become possible if they were left overnight. What does this mean? All the kalim in the Beis HaMikdash, the klishares, anything that remained in there, meat, water, wine, whatever it was, if it remained overnight, the item in it became posel belina. It became posel because it remained overnight. So therefore, any water that was in the kiyar would become posel if it remained there overnight. So he made this very clever contraption where the kiyar was actually placed in a well, in a bur, and it was sort of lowered down through a pulley system into the bur itself, and therefore the water in the cistern connected with the water in the bur, and through a process called hashoka, where the water sort of touch each other, the water in the kiyar remained mayim chayim. It didn't become posel belina. It didn't come invalidated through remaining there overnight. And therefore the next day they would just wind up the kiyar, they would bring it up to the surface, and it would be ready for service, for use for the next day. So therefore Ben Kotin also made a second generous donation of making this muchni lakir, this machine, this system for the kiyar. Okay, third donation. Munbaz HaMelech, he was a king of the time of the Hasmonean dynasty. All the kalim, all the utensils used on Yom Kippur, he would make handles out of gold. He would upgrade them. He wouldn't make the blades out of gold, because the blades, if made out of gold, would be impractical. But just he sort of contented himself with using the handles made out of gold. Hilani Imoy, his mother, Heleni Hamalka, also she also made a donation to the Beis HaMikdash, and she made a nivreshes shel zohav. So there are different pshatim what a nivreshes shel zohav is. The Bar Tanura says it was a menorah. She made a menorah. The Rambam says it was like a sheet of metal. Others say it was a lamp or a lantern. But either way, it was placed. If you imagine, this was the entrance to the ulam, to the heichal. You have the kodesh over here, and beyond it is the kodesh kadashim. So on the entrance to this very tall kodesh, at the top over here, she sort of put on, she stuck on a menorah made out of gold, or a sheet of metal, according to the Rambam, made out of gold, and stuck it onto the entrance so it was visible from afar. And in fact, Chazal say that when the first rays of light rose in Jerusalem, it would reflect off the gold of this menorah placed over here, and therefore people would see that sunrise had occurred, and therefore it was okay to do Kriya Shema Shel Shachris. It was early enough to say Kriya Shema Shel Shachris, one could daven. Okay. And she also made a gold tablet, where the parsha, the section in the Torah where of describing the incidents of the sota was written on it. Because what happened was, when the sota, the adulteress, the lady suspected of adultery, would come into the Beis Hamikdash, they would have to write out the parsha in the Torah which contained the shvuah, the oath of the sota, and they would take that parchment and they would put it into the memorim, into the bitter waters, and that was the whole episode of the sota. But they would have to copy it from a Sefer Torah. So to avoid them having the trouble of bringing in a Sefer Torah and copying it, she sort of put a big plaque up on the wall, similar to what we have nowadays in shuls of the Moedim and the David Hashemori and the Brich Shemei that we put on the wall. So similarly, she made this golden tablet that the Kohen could copy the wording from the tablet onto the parchment to avoid bringing the Sefer Torah and copying from that. Interestingly, the Gemara asks that in those days you weren't allowed to write less than one whole sefer. So how could they write just one section from the Torah? She wasn't allowed to inscribe it on this tablet. How could she do that? You're not allowed to write anything less than one whole sefer from the Torah. So the Gemara answers that she didn't actually write out the full section of the parsha, but rather she wrote out the first word of each pasuk, and each succeeding word in the pasuk she would write just the initial letter. So Vaydaber Hashem, it will be Vaydaber, and then Yud. And then Lamer would just be a Lamed. So just the initial letter of the succeeding words in the pasuk plus the whole of the first word. That's what the Gemara answers. And lastly, Nicanor Nasu Nisim Ledal Soisov. Nicanor, miracles happened to his doors, and they would again praise him for what he did. What is that about? So the Gemara in Lamed Ches Amud Aleph tells the story of Nicanor, who went to buy doors for the Beis Hamikdash. He went to Alexandria in Egypt to bring copper doors for the Beis Hamikdash. Now he travelled home by ship with his beautiful doors, and a storm occurred, and the sailors took one of the doors and threw it overboard to make the ship lighter. And they wanted to do the same with the second door. But Nicanor tied himself to the door and said, if you throw this door in, I'm going with it. And immediately the storm abated, and Nicanor arrived eventually to the port of Akkoy, and he was very upset. He was perturbed that the second door was lost. But miraculously, that door had actually floated with the ship and arrived in the port when he arrived. And even later, when they upgraded the other doors in the Beis Hamikdash to gold doors, they kept these two doors, the Nicanor's two doors, as copper to commemorate the miracle that took place. That is the end of Mishnah Yud.